Good morning, everybody. This is Ian Trevethan. I am the Education and Outreach Manager here at the Sternberg Museum of Natural History. And we are, once again, bringing stuff from the dome to your home. So this morning, we're doing something a little different. My trusty cohort and partner in crime here, Rachel, who is behind the camera. Say hi, Rachel.
Hello.
She had a good idea this morning. So she likes it when I compare my favorite thing, which is Star Wars, to the museum's favorite thing, which is natural history. And she wanted me to talk a little bit about what I've been doing in regards to coming up with interesting ways of teaching natural history. So, as we've established in many previous discussions on our live feeds, I like Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars nerd. And for many of the people that know me, I am that guy. I'm the one guy that has everything Star Wars. So when anything Star Wars related happens, usually I'm the guy they go to, or they send me funny things on Facebook, or give me goofy trinkets that they see around town, whatever. So one of the things I did last year, and I have actually been doing a similar kind of thing now for, 5 years, I think, is I do a Star Wars Day here at the Sternberg Museum. Usually it's in September, and that's a day that's open to the public, and we invite people to come and visit the museum. And on that day, we have a bunch of Star Wars themed things set up. But it's not just mindless, come and pretend that you're in a galaxy far away. We try to pair that with natural history and science concepts. So we try to pick an area, whether it's geology or biology, or even sometimes we'll go into physics and astronomy. And we try to pair that up with some of the things that you see in this fictional galaxy. So one of the things I did last year for my summer program, which usually during the summer I travel around to all parts of Kansas, and I do education programming. So I did a Star Wars zoology themed education program that I went around to different libraries and Comic-Cons and different entities, and I presented this program, and I thought it was a unique way to sort of discuss natural history and sort of compare and contrast some of these fictional animals with the animals that may have inspired them to be created. So I've got a couple of examples here. What I did for this program is I built or borrowed, in some cases, fictional animals from the Star Wars universe. So the first thing I did was I had just seen the Last Jedi, which is episode 8, I believe, in the 9 installment saga. And in that movie, they were on a planet called Crate, which was a mineral planet. And in this case, the mineral was salt, which is a precipitate. And the entire surface of the planet was sort of covered in this salt crystal-like stuff. And there were a bunch of animals running around. They were very fox-like animals. In fact, they were called vulptex, which is kind of funny because vulptex is a play on the scientific name for fox, which is vulpes. So the vulptex are fox-like animals that, instead of fur, appear to have crystals growing off of their body. Now, because I have a degree and background in geology, I sort of looked at this and thought, well, how likely is it that these animals are actually growing crystals right out of their bodies? I don't think that quite works. And I just knocked his ear off. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell the guy who made this. I thought to myself, how is it possible that an animal like this would grow crystals rather than fur? And then I thought about how salt and how precipitates work. And the way I theorize that these animals work is they, in fact, don't grow crystals for fur. They grow fur for fur. So they probably start out when they're very young looking like a fox with regular stalks of hair for fur. And as they spend time growing up and hanging around on that planet's surface, usually there's probably weather patterns, there might be fog, there might be dew, and in that water, the droplets would stick to these stalks of fur. So here I've got a fox skin from our zoology collection. This is I think this is just what kind of fox is this? Is this a red fox? But you can see that they've got fine fur, just like your dog does at home. And what would happen is this would, the stalks of fur would get wet in the morning dew, or if there was a little bit of rain, or if there was fog. And then those water droplets would dry on the stalks of fur. Well, if this is a salt planet, there is salt in those water droplets. And what would be left behind would be a precipitate, or crystals, of salt left behind after the water evaporates. And that precipitate, or those crystal, or bits of crystal salt on the stalks of the fur, is what causes the fur to look like crystals. So these animals are running around, they look like crystalline animals, but actually I think it's probably precipitated salt that has stuck to their fur and makes them look like crystal foxes. So that's kind of a cool thing, just a combination right there of a little bit of biology or zoology. In this case, we identify this as a fox. I can't stand that it doesn't have its other ear, so I'm going to put its other ear back on. This poor thing had a bit of an accident a couple weeks ago, got knocked off of its pedestal and hit the ground pretty hard, so it's in need of a little bit of a repair right now. But you can see in size that it's roughly the same size as a fox that we would see in this area of Kansas even. And what I wanted to do was basically I built this up from the skeleton all the way to I put each one of these crystals on. So when I envisioned this, I wanted to get as close to the actual animal that we saw in the movie as possible. And there are things I would do different now, but when I started, I'd never done this before. So I started from the skeleton, and then from the skeleton, I put what I thought would be muscle definition, and then I actually used an actual cast of a fox skull. So there's actually a fox skull underneath there. Now, things I would change now that I've done this is I don't think I made the neck long enough. So I think the neck needs to be longer. And if I were to ever do this again, I would just go straight for buying a taxidermy form instead of building my own body from the bones up. So it was a very interesting experience in creating an animal. So I had to use all of my talents. I had to use a lot of what I learned in college to be able to sort of reconstruct this fictional animal to make it as realistic as possible. So that's your Vulptex fox, and then this is your earthly fox, or Vulpes. So that's kind of cool. So the other animal that we're going to look at today, that again, this one is from The Last Jedi. Let me make sure it's... So this is our porg. Some people love them, some people can't stand them. I don't mind them as much, but I know there are people out there that are like, ugh, porgs. Chewbacca thinks they taste delicious. So porgs are interesting. So the place that they filmed where these animals were in the movie The Last Jedi was a place called Skellig Michael, which is an island off of the west coast of Ireland. And it's a pretty small island. You could probably walk from one end to the other in about an hour or two. It's not a huge island, but it's very rocky, it's very desolate, and it's actually the site of some very interesting archaeological stuff. So that lived there and built structures. So it's a very, very protected area, and actually in a couple of ways. Number one, it's protected because of the archaeology, or the archaeological significance, these ancient structures that were built by monks that isolated themselves on these islands. And number two, there are protected birds there. So this is a puffin, and it turns out that Skellig Michael, the island of Skellig Michael, is populated by puffins. So when they went to go film the movie on the island at Skellig Michael, they discovered bazillions of puffins hanging around. And of course, this is supposed to be a story that takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And it's a little bit hard to explain what all these puffins are doing in the background. Now, remember that not only did the crew have restrictions in what they could do with the structures, they weren't allowed to alter anything as far as the archaeological structures, but they also weren't allowed to harass or move the puffins in any way because they're protected, and Ireland takes that stuff pretty seriously. So they weren't able to shoot them out of the frame or the scene that they were shooting. So in post-production, they shot the scenes, and you've got Luke Skywalker and Rey doing all the things they did in the movie, and you've got these little puffins running around in the background. Well, in order to solve that problem, they just turned the puffins into little alien-like creatures. So the porgs were digitally rendered wherever a puffin would stray onto the scene or to the frame of the camera. So instead of making them look like a puffin, I mean, you can see a resemblance, definitely, but they kind of put this little weird cat face on them. But they can also fly because they had flying puffins in the background and they had to make these guys fly. So that's how you ended up with a porg, is porgs are digitally rendered space puffins. So now you know. So instead of building my own porg, which is really what I would do if I were to build this exhibit again, I ended up using a couple of toys because, for example, one of the things I talked about was a Rancor, which is this giant monster you see in Return of the Jedi. I didn't have time nor resources nor space really to build a full-size Rancor monster, right? So I just brought my little Rancor figure from home. But one of the things that is in the back of my mind is when I do a program, I want it to be original material. So while I was okay with using these toys as examples, I would prefer to have created my own props, but sometimes time and money doesn't allow for that. So I did what the plan B, which is grab all of my action figures and use them, but it's a little hard to get scale. I did build a full-size Tauntaun, which is an animal you see in Empire Strikes Back when they're on the ice planet of Hoth. And what they do is they ride these Tauntauns around the surface of this ice planet that they're hiding out on. And I had a little action figure that was about this big, and that was just not impressive at all. So that's actually how this whole idea started. I thought, it would be really fun to build a full-size Tauntaun just to see if I can, and then compare and contrast that to some of the things in this museum. That's how the whole idea started. So maybe we can dig up some pictures and post them later of the Tauntaun build progress. So if there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them if anybody's watching, if anybody's interested. Otherwise, we will call it a morning, and I will see you probably tomorrow morning. We'll probably do a morning live feed on some interesting subject. I haven't decided yet. And then in the afternoon, I'm hoping we will visit with our zoological collections manager, Curtis Schmidt, and he's going to talk a little bit more in depth about our ornithology collection. So we're going to talk about birds, because we tried to do this once before and our feed got interrupted and we never got back to completing it. So he felt like he wanted to come back and try it again and do it a little bit more completely. So that's something to look forward to tomorrow afternoon as well. So like always, please share and like our live feeds. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section. We're always looking, and we'll try our best to answer any of the questions that might come up. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll see you soon.